Today's talk is titled The Monastic Life, to be delivered by Andy Feigin. Andy Feigin travels near and far for many reasons. Among them is a search for beauty, joy, and meaningful life. As a Unitarian Universalist, he finds inspiration in observing how people around the world live their lives and pursue their search for enlightenment. Today, he hopes to share with us some of what he has found. Andy.
Thanks, Diane. I meet once a month with a UU minister, Reverend Kelly Murphy Mason, in her capacity as a spiritual director. After many sessions with her, it became clear that I could benefit from some quiet time, some time to just listen to what is in my heart, a retreat. I finally got around to taking a stab at a retreat this past January, spending a few nights at the new Camaldoli Hermitage up in Big Sur. They have a user-friendly, welcoming website through which you can book your room and board, and that's what I did, and I kept a journal. Tuesday, January 20th, 2026, 2:15 p.m. The drive north was a pleasant one in my convertible. I kept a conservative speed and allowed a number of cars to pass me when turnouts were available. The views of the coastline and the mountains were spectacular. Just south of the turnoff for the Hermitage, there was a construction zone letting traffic through one direction at a time. All the cars that had passed me were in line, waiting. Their speedy efforts nullified by the highway worker in a bright yellow jacket holding a stop sign. I had enjoyed a meandering drive in awe of the beauty, having eliminated the pressure to drive fast in order to satisfy others who were in a hurry. I sensed a lesson in this, a tortoise and the hare kind of parable. Shortly beyond that stoppage, I turned right and headed up the 1.5-mile scenic drive to its conclusion at the Hermitage bookstore, where one registers. I noticed that a blue Miata, also a convertible, also with its top down, turned in just after me. I had thought of letting them pass, but the driveway was too narrow. I proceeded to climb the lovely paved road at a gentle speed, the Miata keeping a respectful distance behind me. Then the road turned from paved to dirt. I looked in my rearview mirror to see that my car was creating a heavy cloud of dust, which was consuming the Miata. I believe that car slowed down or it completely stopped in order to let the dust settle before proceeding. Indeed, they arrived well after I had completed my check-in. I hope they took the time to enjoy the breathtaking views. Perhaps another lesson in that. Sometimes it is wise not letting others pass, or you might get stuck in their dust. I had hardly begun my retreat, and already I was discovering something. A monk welcomed me as soon as I entered the bookstore. He was wearing a robe. As I walked in, he asked if I was Andrew. I am. He provided a quick orientation and a map of the retreat grounds. I asked when the evening service would take place. He told me Vespers would be at 5 p.m. and a bell will sound 5 minutes prior. I proceeded back to my car and down the driveway to my room, number 3, with Saint Albertino's name on the door. Blessed Albertinus of Mentone was a 13th century Italian Benedictine, best known for his role as a peacemaker, mediating conflicts between his monastery and the town of Gubbio, Italy. The room was as expected. The Hermitage website includes photographs of each room. I settled in, and then I sat in the garden while I took in the coastal view and read through the information booklet provided to guests. From it, I learned about the origin story of the Camaldolese Benedictine monks, tracing back to the 6th century monastic traditions of Saint Benedict, as further defined in the 11th century by their founder, Saint Romuald. 5 p.m., Vespers. While enjoying my view of the coastline, the evening bell rang, and I made my way up the hill to the chapel. Several fellow retreaters were already seated on the plain wooden benches, and 2 monks, robed with shaved heads, were seated in chairs on the innermost row, surrounding an open space with lecterns at either end. I took a seat and then noticed the other guests had a sheet of paper and a book. I went back to the entryway and acquired an order of service and a book with the words Vespers on the binder. I returned to my seat. Another monk entered. He was older and tall, with a coif of gray hair. He reminded me of my father. One more monk entered, and I'm pretty sure he was the greeter at the bookstore, and the service began. I had read in the booklet that many of the monks were called to monastic life as a second career. Former lay careers such as teacher, engineer, military, business executive, etc. I couldn't help but wonder what these men's lives were before they chose this life. The last monk to enter was the lead monk. He announced the number of the hymns we would be singing, and we all rose and sang a cappella. Then we sat and began a series of essentially responsive readings from the sections listed on the order of service. I listened and read along. Others recited the words, which they were clearly familiar with, all in English. There were adequate pauses between readings for contemplation. I appreciated that once I realized it was the way they roll. At one point, the lead monk stood, picked up a book from beneath his seat, presumably a Bible, went to one of the lecterns and read a passage aloud. Then he sat down and the service continued as it had before. Then the lead monk stood once again and crossed to the other lectern, which had a bowl of water, holy water, I presume, and a brush. He recited more prayers, dipped the brush in the water, and sprayed the 2 monks with water. More prayer, and then he sprayed that third older monk with water. More prayer, and then he sprayed the guests across from me with water, and then he sprayed me and my neighbor. Then he turned around to face a portrait of a woman, Mary, I presume, on the very plain wall behind him. Everyone stood, so I stood, and turned in the same direction and recited one more prayer in unison. That wrapped up the service. All the monks but the gray-haired one, who reminded me of my father, exited. He stayed behind to explain to we retreaters that we were welcome to join in a half-hour of silent prayer and meditation further into the chapel, but that we should be careful because there are 2 steps down into the space, and he was concerned we might trip and fall. Everyone but me followed him. A bit unsure of myself, I opted to leave the chapel and walk quietly back to my room, stopping to pick up my dinner from the kitchen. Wednesday, January 21st. I slept a long night with total peace and quiet. Breakfast, made toast with peanut butter in the kitchen, brought it back to my room, leaving my screen door closed, but the main door open. Boiled water in a kettle and made coffee with the supplies they provided. All I need to start the day. But as I got up to pour more coffee, I felt that I should close the main door. Keeping it open was an unconscious way of welcoming others to look in and see that I was there, I realized. But that is a social energy which I'm purposely retreating from for this brief respite. I'm amused by how this self-proclaimed introvert was inclined to invite human contact even while on a silent retreat. I am indeed a social animal. After breakfast, I got lost in my reading, noticing how thoroughly I was able to focus. Having no distractions was a wonderful condition I had been yearning for. I vowed to find a way to recreate that condition in my own home. Perhaps design a space where I can eliminate distraction. Is that something that requires a physical design, or can it be achieved through discipline? I've been working on that. As I read more about the Camaldolese, I find much that harmonizes with my own spiritual beliefs. As Stephen Lloyd Moffat taught us, it's okay to pick and choose from the smorgasbord of religions, finding those parts that work for each of us as we travel on our spiritual journey. The booklet states that the Camaldolese Benedictine monastic life can be described in three basic qualities. It is incarnational, eschatological, and evangelical. Incarnational. These Christian monastics believe that God became flesh, assumed a human nature, and became a man in the form of Jesus Christ. Well, I don't believe that, but I like the more general definition of incarnational. It literally means embodied in flesh or taking on flesh. For me, that means the divine is in me, in all of us, embodied in our flesh. Eschatological. The Camaldolese monks believed in the second coming of Christ, the apocalypse, all that stuff. Well, I don't believe in that either. But it led me to ponder the meaning of our existence. I don't believe that the universe revolves around human beings, but it is fascinating to imagine not an end of times, but what the future, the distant future, holds for us, or what will evolve to follow us. Evangelical. Although they state that spreading the Christian gospel is their third basic quality, in my time at the Hermitage, I felt no pressure to follow any beliefs other than my own. I participated in their Vesper service and felt nothing but appreciation for the simple, sincere, peaceful way in which they practiced their rituals. I was inspired by their quiet devotion without being asked to adhere to anything but a respectful presence. 3 p.m. I head out for a walk down the road, stopping at benches with gorgeous views along the way. I came across a trailhead for the Fence Loop Trail and made a mental note to inquire about it before venturing too far tomorrow. While sitting on one of the benches, a leaf falls on me, a large leaf. It startled me. When I looked at it closely, I see that it is partially cracked, and the words from the Leonard Cohen song Anthem came to mind. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. I move to another bench as the marine layer rolls in. We're surrounded by a blanket of fog. A deep breath and a chance for meditation, guided by the birds and the reeds and the breeze. Perhaps you can hear them too. Having been there the previous evening, I know the drill and collect my Vespers book and order of service, and I sit back down. There were some new retreaters who had joined that day, and they didn't have the order of service or their prayer book. And I saw one of the young monks get up, go to the foyer, grab a couple of both, bring them to the guests, and then sit down. And as he sat down, he faced me and saw I had my stuff and went like that. Very modern, very human. It was great. The service concluded with the same invitation to meditation, and this time I stayed, sitting in the rotunda on a bench for a very peaceful 30-minute meditation. In my room after dinner, that's a new time. I frequently ask Reverend Kelly questions about the Bible. She has at times recommended I read the Psalms. So I lift up the Bible provided in my room and start flipping through Psalms until my eye catches Psalm 58, the dethroning of unjust rulers. You can tell it's coming. Having escaped current events for at least a couple of days, I could not stop myself from reading about the dethroning of unjust rulers. Quote, "The wicked have been corrupt since birth, liars from the womb. They have gone astray. Let them dissolve like a snail that oozes away, like an untimely birth that never sees the sun." Spot on. There's another piece from the smorgasbord that rang true for me in Here and Now. Thursday, January 22nd. I left the new Camaldoldi Hermitage inspired by the beauty of a down-to-earth life dedicated to pursuit of one's spirituality and with the knowledge that quiet, not just in decibels but also in spirit, was a condition and a choice I needed to make, a practice in my life going forward. Turn the calendar several pages to this month of June. My wife, Mimi, and I are on vacation, so let's sail away to Fiji and a beautiful resort on the small island of Tokoriki. June 1, 2026, Tokoriki Island, Fiji. I attend the Sunday evening service in the lovely chapel on the resort grounds. The guest information book said resort guests were invited to join, especially to enjoy the choral singing that was part of the service. I arrived and noticed shoes in the doorway, so I slipped off my sandals and entered barefooted. All the attendees were seated. Randy, if you could advance after you let this person in, I guess. All the attendees were seated in the back pews of this small chapel with a preacher at the dais. I took a seat in front of those attendees. The preacher read from a Bible exclusively in Fijian. I could not understand a word, but soaked in the Spirit. Unbeknownst to me, at one point he must have called for a hymn to be sung. One of the men tapped me on the shoulder and whispered in my ear, "At this time we stand." So, of course, I stood up while they all sang a beautiful hymn a cappella. We then sat down and the service continued. Others, including a guest couple and Anna, a staff person I recognized, entered and took seats. Anna sat in the row in front of me, and when the next hymn was called for, we all stood, and Anna sang the first notes on her own, followed by all the congregation joining in. Their voices blended beautifully in harmony, while rhythms were tapped out with feet and hands. I could thump along with the rhythm and was able to tell when the hymn was ending, joining in with the Amen. I got that part. At one point, an older member of the congregation rose, walking forward toward the altar. which consisted of a thick wooden slab in front of a stained glass window depicting gulls flying over a beautiful tropical lagoon. Yeah. He began speaking quietly, directing his words toward the preacher. His statement, all in Feigin, felt somewhat confessional, or perhaps like words spoken during our joys and concerns. Then he turned to face us, and speaking in English, he thanked we three guests for honoring the congregation by attending their holy gathering, and for being their guests on the island. Often when Fijians greet you, they say, "Welcome home." Even though clearly the island is not my home, they're sharing that Fiji is home for all humanity, and all are welcome. Hospitality is a powerful force in Fiji. Next came what sure seemed like a sermon, accompanied by the dramatic gestures and the emphasis you might expect from a traditional sermon. Then the preacher paused, lifted what appeared to be a legal pad on top of and put it on top of his Bible, and said, "Now in English for our guests," and proceeded to deliver his sermon in the language I could understand. He was speaking about the importance of rest and how Jesus urged his followers to shed their burdens. And he read this passage from Matthew chapter 11, 28 through 30. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest in your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." He tied that together with the fact that we resort guests had certainly come to such a beautiful place as Tokoriki for rest, to find ease and lighten our burdens. He made clear that the resort workers, who formed the majority of the worshipers in the chapel, were committed to doing the work of Jesus, providing rest for our souls. Amen. A final hymn was sung, and the service was over. I'm not sure if the preacher called for it or it simply just happened, but at that point we all were shaking each other's hands and hugging and just sharing what felt like simple, joyous love of fellow humans in a beautiful place. The minister had moved to the doorway, and as I made my way out, I shook his hand and thanked him, "Vinaka." Then I somewhat awkwardly got into the sandals I had left on the front step and started my way down a stone staircase. It had gotten dark outside, and I may have seemed a bit unsteady as I started my descent. I felt a warm arm wrap around my shoulders. One of the attendees, a big man with a deep voice, perhaps the man who had whispered, "At this time we stand," was helping me navigate the steps. "Are you all right? Are you alone? Do you need help getting back to your room? Are you alone?" he repeated. I answered, "I'm here with my wife, but she's back at our villa." We made it down the steps to flat ground. Again, he asked if I needed help finding my way, and I assured him I was okay. "Vinaka, thank you." I headed off feeling the warmth of the connection we had made, and some of my burdens eased. Later that evening, on our way to dinner, Randy maybe advance for me, passing staff members along the pathway, Mimi sensed from the staff an appreciation for the guy, me, who had chosen to share their spiritual lives. Whether it was literal or imagined, I felt more connected at that moment than any other during my time at the resort on Tokoriki. A hermitage retreat, a Fijian Sunday service. As a Unitarian Universalist for some 25 years now, I've come to deeply appreciate the value of pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Thank you.